Welcome to Self-Centered Living, a podcast that serves as a vital platform for women of color across cultures and backgrounds to take charge of our narratives and where our voices are centered. I'm your host, Trish, and here we delve into our diverse experiences and rich humanity through a blend of personal stories and insightful discussions with a range of guests. Our aim is to foster meaningful connections and understanding among our listeners. This season, we're exploring the scripts that shape us, the ones we inherited, the ones that were imposed, and the ones that want to emerge when we can finally see them. Today, I'm fortunate to be chatting with Teri Schwimmer. Teri, in the spirit of self-centered living, which is about self-authorship, rather than I introduce you, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Trish. Thanks for having me. So, Terry Schwimmer. I guess I'll just sort of say what's important to me right now and what I'm doing. I'm actually in a high-tech HR business partner role. We'll talk more about my journey to get to that point, I think, but that's where I'm at right now. I'm married for 25 plus years with my husband, who's been an amazing partner. We don't have any children, but we have a fur baby named Teddy, who we've had for almost 13 years. I play poker semi-professionally, and that's what occupies most of my time.
Take me back to what was the world like when you were growing up? What did it look like in your family?
Definitely a lot different than I think how families are today. It was my parents and my younger sister. We grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, and both my parents worked, and they were in, I would just say, not necessarily, I don't want to say blue collar, but jobs that did not necessarily require an education. They worked extremely hard. And because of that, since I was the oldest, I needed to help weigh in and help with cooking and helping to babysit my younger sister, probably younger than most people would need to do because of my parents needing to both work. We had I think probably somewhat traditional Japanese culture was infused in how we grew up, just based on 3 of my 4 grandparents were born in Japan directly. I was very much focused on being one of the best students I could possibly be and being very active in many different activities. That just was something I always had that balance of trying to be a good student, but also doing other things besides just going to school.
Your sister, significantly younger than you or a couple of
About a
years?
year and a half.
What did you learn about who you were supposed to be very early on?
I think I learned that I needed to be responsible and accountable, that I needed to work hard, that I think just observing my parents and what they did to create a safe and a good environment for us, that those are the things that took away that I needed to focus on and making sure to do in the future and contribute the best way that I could to help the family.
What sort of path did that take you to? It's interesting with kids at some point very early on, they might hint at what they're interested in.
When I was 10, I wanted to be a cardiovascular surgeon. And so
Wow.
that That was my specific goal that I was trying to achieve. My mother worked for physicians as an office support or office manager. My aunt was, in charge of the emergency room and trauma center at a local hospital, so I had exposure to the healthcare field. I really liked science and math, so that was really what I focused on. I knew that, so therefore I wanted to go to college, obviously go to medical school. Those were early on my goals and what I, really set as targets for me.
At 10, you're saying this. How did your parents respond?
My parents always thought I was more serious than I should be at the age that
Okay.
I was. They encouraged me, but they also, tried to make sure to be more balanced, not just focus on school. To be honest, all my cousins and my sisters probably all thought I was way too serious. One of the things that lived with me as a child and I found out as an adult why I felt this way is that my cousins and my sister, they resented me a bit because their parents would always say, "Well, why can't you be more like Terry?" As an adult, I found that out, and that was kinda like, "Oh, so I did feel a little bit isolated growing up, and now I know why." It's because they were all sort of, like, resenting that their parents were saying, "Well, why can't you be more this way like Terry?" It helped to explain a lot as I was older and had some conversations with my cousins.
If I look at the rigor in raising children today and how quickly you can be labeled as a parent who's failed if your child isn't in this program or didn't go to this school, I love that your parents were actually saying, let there be balance. One of the things I think of when I think about Japanese culture, harmony by far is probably the more common one. How much of that was part of your parents telling you to be more balanced, or was it even informed by the culture?
I'm not sure if it exactly ties to the culture as much as that they just, saw that I was so driven and that they wanted to make sure they understood that you just have to be successful for what makes you happy. So they would bring those types of comments to me, right? That I didn't necessarily have to continuously drive so hard to try to achieve because that was something that was always on my mind. I'm actually when I think back on it, my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, he seemed to have high expectations of what I could achieve. And so it was then sort of proving that yes, I can do these things and I can be successful. And then also I think a little bit of when growing up being Japanese American that sometimes in school people might look at you a certain way and they actually thought that because you're Japanese American you should be able to be successful or this is just expected of you. And so I think there were expectations put on me not necessarily from my parents but from the external world that you should be able to do this because that's where you came from. I think that probably had more pressure on me than from my home and from my culture or family.
As we're talking about this, I'm asking myself, doing that self audit, what do you think about Japanese culture? What does it mean to have a Japanese American friend? I think of total quality management that we studied in grad school. I expect you to be very efficient. All these things we carry. So it's good to hear how it showed up for you, but also how when people are looking at you with their expectations, they are in some way shaping how you show up. You know, you mentioned before when we were talking that very early on, you learned poker. And I want to go back to that because I went back to my notes, going back to when I was thinking about approaching you. I do the self audit. What comes to Trisha's mind when she thinks about Japanese culture? Wabi sabi, this concept of finding beauty in imperfection, that's what I'm living in right now. So that concept was top of mind. And then ikigai, having a sense of purpose, which I can say, having worked with you. For the listeners, you and I go back some 20 years when we worked together at Thermo Fisher Scientific and we were on the same HR leadership team. I can definitely say that you lead with a sense of purpose. Of course, I thought about samurais, honor, skill. These are the things that came to mind for me. What I did not think about that you've done as long as I've known you from very beginning, it was known that this is important to you, was that you play poker and that you also play it competitively. How did poker come into your life?
Well, yeah, it is unique, although I think many Asians do have a tendency to enjoy gambling, but including my family. My family would always play poker after Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas dinner. Instead of playing board games, that's what would happen. There'd be a poker game. When I was 12, I actually, after observing for many years, I was allowed to play and be at the table with my own money. So that was like a big rite of passage, and I was able to do pretty well. And from that, I continued to play. My grandmother was a key person because I really respected how she played poker of all the family members. So I really tried to learn from her, and she actually was the person when I first went to a casino when I turned 21 in Lake Tahoe. She's the one who helped to be at the table with me and tried to help to guide me as much as she could. You couldn't be telling someone exactly what to do when you're sitting at the same poker table, but she helped to guide me and give me more feedback after the fact. So I really respected how she played. Like I said, I really tried to mirror how she did things. And so it was really in 2001 where I started seeing this on TV and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I can do that. I know how to do that. I've played this for decades." And so I went to a poker fantasy camp in Las Vegas. I did very well. Since 2001, I started playing competitively and it's been a great hobby. I continue to enjoy tournament poker and trying to do the best that I can and learn from my mistakes and continue to have good results.
What was it about how she was playing your grandmother that you appreciated and that was different versus other family members?
She just had this level of patience, waiting for the right time to play, not playing every single hand. I saw that, how she played at the table. She also was strategic and she'd look at, taking advantage of the situation of who she was playing and what cards she might have had and such. So, but the patience and just strategically thinking about where you're at and what you're doing and who you're playing against, those were the key things that I saw. She was measured also about how she played. And so I really respected and she did well, and so and she was a woman playing poker, which is not very common even now in today's world playing poker. Women still are a small percentage of who plays, but, all of those things were really that what resonated with me and why I really aspired to do as well as she did.
What opened up for you seeing your grandmother playing it?
I think what it opened up for me is that you can pursue things that are not necessarily traditionally what people think you can do, but you can pursue it and you can do well, and so you can go against what norms are. So I think that whole process and seeing her and how she did, and it was not just even poker. She actually worked till she was 85, and so it was just seeing that yes, you can do things on your own terms, and you can be able to be successful even in a situation where people may not have those expectations. Even to this day, people, when they find out I play poker competitively, it's like a big shocker. It's like, "What? Really?"
What specifically is shocking them?
It's because people view me as somewhat conservative, being, especially like Japanese American traits, right? Being an HR business partner. I think all of those things, people are like, what? You play poker? So I think those are the things where it surprises them.
You know what? Actually, going back now and thinking about it, when you did say when we were working together that you played poker, initially my feeling was like, oh, she gambles. But we all gamble. Life is a gamble. Life involves risk. We're always assessing it. People play lotto every day. That's gambling. Reflecting on it in preparation to talk with you, I then was seeing the ways in which you moved and wondering, was she using her poker skills in these different situations? Heaven knows, working with executives and their teams, you had to know how to have a poker face. The running joke was that I did not have a very good poker face. When was the first time you realized in a corporate setting that you were actually tapping into and using these skills that you learned from your family? When did you recognize, wow, these things are also helping me?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'd say about 13 years ago, a VP, it was like a Friday late in the day. He comes to my office. He goes, Terry, I have a poker tournament I'm going to for my friends this weekend. Do you have some tips? And I thought to myself, "Sure," close the door. I gave him, like, 5 tips, but then thought about that and reflected, like, "Oh, yeah, it's like the skills that I have in HR, being a good HR business partner, and also poker, there's a lot of similarities." For instance, to your point, having a good poker face, I think that's something I excel at where people, the bubble in my head when I'm really thinking when a manager does something that we think is just outrageous, but you don't really show that and you just say other things versus what's coming up into your mind. Being able to make good decisions with limited information because we know we don't always have every single fact when we're having to try to guide leaders and make decisions. Being able to read people, and people will say that, "Oh, we have to worry about you because you can read us." Yeah, most times I can read you and understand what's going on. Being able to make competitive advantage decisions and take advantage of those situations based on what you know and who you're dealing with and such. So those things definitely can help both in poker and being an effective HR business partner. So I think that's when, like I said years ago, I realized that that was the case. And at the end of that story of guiding and giving the tips to the VP, on Monday he comes back and I said, "Hey, how did you do?" And he says, "Oh, not very well. I was doing really great initially, but then I drank too much and then I basically didn't do well." I'm like, "Well, I didn't tell you to drink a lot, but okay." So the tips were working until he drank too much.
What are the things that you're able to learn about just how humans behave when you're sitting at the poker table?
That's a great question too. So I think what I learned is that, especially if the newer players, these people who are like in their teens, they just think that they know everything and they make a lot of assumptions about you. And so, you learn that, yeah, you can take advantage of those situations. If people make assumptions about you, you can take advantage of those. And I have many times at the poker table. I think the other thing is that you have to learn if you're going to be playing in a situation or a sport where mostly men are there, that you have to have a very thick skin and you have to not take things personally, that you have to just basically be your own person, play your game, but not let them try to influence you by the things that they say to you to try to get under your skin. And so, yeah, that's one thing that I've really learned, and that being a competitive poker player is not easy, and it takes a lot of discipline to make sure that you're not getting in a typical financial situation, because I've seen some people where you can buy in sometimes multiple buy-ins to a tournament, and they will buy in like 3 or 4 times, and that could be like $1,000 each time. I've learned that no, because you have to have discipline, which I do have, that helps me so I don't get into a gambleaholic situation. Learning that using my strengths, but also understanding that you can't control everything. You can only control yourself.
So people generally have a tendency, or what you've witnessed is that they lose that discipline and they get in over their heads.
Yes.
The other piece that I heard was, being that it is predominantly male, some of these assumptions that they impose on you. Being in the corporate world, there are also those assumptions that likely have been imposed on you as a Japanese American woman. Can you tell me about a time when something was being imposed on you that was in contradiction to who you are, and how poker came into play managing through that situation?
One specific situation was a president of this business who I was more recently supporting them. They said, "We need to do this program. This is what corporate's saying." He also was Asian, not Japanese, but he was Chinese descent, and he said, "Oh, no, no, we don't need to do that, Terry. We're just not gonna do that." I think because of who we thought I was, that I would just go along with it and just say, "Okay, sure." And I said, "No." I said, "If that's what you wanna do, then you need to go to your manager at corporate and tell them that I'm not going to say that we did it and we didn't do it. That's not gonna happen." I think he was surprised that I stood up and I said something, because I think he made an assumption based on who I was and, my culture. I wouldn't speak up and I would just go along with what he was saying. I said no, and poker side of me, I'm going to stand up for myself and I'm going to draw the line. I'm not going all in with you saying that this is going to happen. I basically decided in that situation I'm folding and I'm going to be leaving, which I did within a few months after that, because I decided that that's not an environment that I could tolerate and be able to operate effectively in.
What has been the cost to holding the line?
Yeah, in my career, there's probably been, I'd say 3 times or so where I've really held to hold the line like that. It has taken a cost, because one time when I did that, basically, I was not then allowed to go to, for instance, a certain strategic, training that I was told I was gonna be going to, but then I was taken away because I had held the line and spoken up. Also, I was not, I was not able to move up within the HR organization at that corporation because I spoke up, and so what has happened is that over time, because I have this line of full on integrity and I stand the ground with that, it's impacted me where I probably could have gone up higher within the HR organizations, even maybe led HR in a high tech world. But I made the conscious decision that that wasn't as important as keeping my integrity and holding the line when I saw something that was just totally not right, and speak my mind.
And that feels similar to how you were placing on yourself this pressure to succeed, this pressure to do well. Doesn't feel like a pressure, but it feels like something that is a Terry thing, integrity that I'm not going to negotiate. How did that come to be?
I think it came to be, ingrained in me, like our culture, Japanese Americans, we had some things that were very wrong that happened to us during World War II, right? I think, to be honest, that ties into my strong feeling that that was so wrong. That is really driven me. Also, when I see underdog people who are being oppressed, that really drives me. Like, that's just wrong. It's more about what is wrong. I've been raised that I need to focus on doing the right thing. That really has driven me across my life as far as how I respond or address certain situations because of those things.
Since you've entered it, we should name it, specifically what happened early on, the experience of Japanese Americans between the time period of 1942, 1945, and following the bombing of Pearl Harbor. The government forcibly relocated and incarcerated approximately 120,000 Japanese Americans. You know this, but I'm saying this for listeners that might not be aware. During that time, the majority were US citizens, went into what was known as internment camp under Executive Order 9066, signed by Franklin D. Roosevelt. It authorized a mass removal based solely on ancestry. Families lost homes, businesses, livelihoods, and dignity. And I'll say that again, and dignity, because that's one of the lasting costs. Many who survived it, including your father, never spoke about it. I believe 1988, the US government acknowledged that there was the internment and that it was based on race, prejudice, or hysteria and failure of political leadership. That's a lot. That's me doing my research to understand it and having grown up hearing about it. You, as a person who has a parent who was actually in one of these camps, how does that land for you?
Both my parents were impacted by that order, 9066. My father and his family, they were actually had to go into people were referring them as you mentioned in internment camps, but that was a language the government put upon us. And even when I was growing up, my relatives and my father, they didn't want to really call it what it was. But I've been really into this more because of actually Rachel Maddow in her podcast, the burn order, and she had a special about this. They were prison camps. That's what they were. My father was about 6 years old when along with his family, that he was in the prison camp in Jerome, Arkansas. I had other relatives who were in these prison camps. My mother and her family, they relocated involuntarily to Idaho because there was in that order, if you had family inland, then you could potentially move. This is all, I think, as a reaction to your point from the bombing of Pearl Harbor. What take away from this, and still, it's painful somewhat to understand that that happened to people in my family, in my direct family, and that yes, this reparation was $20,000, which was really nothing. My father and his family lost tons of acres of farmland that because they couldn't pay the property taxes and maintain them while they were in the prison camps, there's nothing that they could do. And so they lost all that land. So yeah, it was a reparation, but it was more minimal from a financial perspective, but at least the government did recognize that this was wrong. I guess the concerns I have is that it's hitting a nerve now, what's going on in our country, because similar things seem to be happening, whether it's, you know, Somalians or others who are being targeted because of their ancestry. This is very concerning and disturbing to me what's going on in our country based on the experience of what my family has gone through from having been in prison camps in this country and wrongly in prison camps.
You mentioned present day. We have ICE raids happening across the US. I think about this rhetoric around security being used to justify this sweeping action and to start to militarize cities and how the citizens get caught in the crossfire. You said reparations were $20,000. That seems more symbolic to go along with the apology, but it doesn't take into full account the lasting impact. You and I are sitting here and in our conversation, seeing how it informs how you grew up. The other piece that I've heard was your family's reluctance to talk about it. How did your family's silence, particularly your father's, also inform how you grew up?
It wasn't just my father, it was all most of my relatives, they didn't wanna talk about it. I think partly that was because of the fear that they had gone through, but also culturally, the Japanese, they have this term "gaman," which you just take it and just go, just live with it. It is what it is type of thing. I think how it informed me was that that's not how I wanna be. I don't wanna be holding it in, not calling it what it is, seeing what it did to them and what they had to put everything down and just kinda accept it. That informed me that that's not how I want to be, and that's not how I am. That's the strongest impact it had on me. Also, seeing my situations where my father, he had racial biases because of what he went through, and I understood it. I didn't like them necessarily, but I at least understood them. I just said to myself, "Okay, I don't want to have those same types of situations and thinking," and so that helped inform my thinking about, trying to accept people in different backgrounds, different situations, and that, people should have the right and choice to choose what they wanna be and who they wanna be without any kind of implications or negative fallback from the government.
I want to honor some of the secrecy. There's many groups who have these stories that we can tell, some of us where reparations still has not come. What I identify with is the older generation and parents not wanting to place that burden on us so that we believe we have possibility. I may have mentioned to you before, Michelle Norris has a memoir. It's called The Grace of Silence. Her father had been shot at the ending of World War II, coming out of the Navy by a Birmingham police officer. She and her father were close, and she never knew about this. Yet, learning about it, she could point to in her memoir how this informed how he showed up and how, as a result, it informs how she shows up. So I want to hold that some of the withholding, the secrecy is beneficial in the way that we don't hopefully carry that burden. But then there is also the cost.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And going back to how you're now choosing, okay, I'm not going to have the secrecy and I am going to speak up for what does not feel right, which takes us to what's emerging. You and I talk about this a lot, the political landscape. I want to enter it in recognizing that the country's polarized and how that looks in our lives are we have family members who hold views that may be very different than ours. I'm also trusting on our handy HR background, the diplomacy that it calls on of how we are able to navigate these conversations. Politically, you've made some changes and something new is emerging for you. Most of your life, you shared with me, you were Republicans. Now you're more independent. I really want to point it to what's emerging for you. You went to your first protest, No King's protest, recently, inspired by a friend. Tell me about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm happy to share that. Yeah, since I was 18 when I could first vote, I was registered Republican. By the way, both my parents were Democrats, so they always kept giving me a bad time about that. But I I believed in most of the platform back then. This was in the 80s or whatever. But what happened is in like probably like the 2015, 2016, I always voted for the presidential election. I did not vote in 2016 for the presidential candidate because neither candidate was someone I could vote for. So I didn't vote for either candidate. And then, yeah, obviously, in 2020, I was actually went from Republican in that during that time frame to be registered as independent. But then I moved to register from independent to Democrat because I found out in California you can't vote in the primaries if you're an independent. And so that drove me to okay, I'll just go ahead and I don't necessarily that align to that platform 100% either, but I'm a registered Democrat because of that, so I can vote in the primaries. What really shifted for me, why I had to make this change, was because the party that I had been part of, they no longer were really upholding the things that I believed in as far as, business and government separate, financial responsibilities and balancing the budget and things like that. When it got into where people, as I mentioned earlier, they were being singled out by who they are or what they believe in, that they were being, in a sense, persecuted or having their rights taken away, that was a line too far. Or the fact that Roe v. Wade was overturned. I had very firm views that people should be able to do what's best for them and maintain their rights. Because of that, yes, I started like writing letters for the election for 2024 for people to encourage them for to vote. And yeah, went in
140 letters, let's
yeah,
just say it.
140 letters.
140 letters.
And then went to the first protest, and my 84-year-old mother, when I told her I was going, she said, "Well, can I go with you?" And so she came with us. My friend had the signs, and it felt good to actually get out there and see all these thousands of people and be part of that to say, "Yes, we don't think this is right, and we're saying that it's not right by being here and participating."
I think you mentioned earlier, it's not just the participation and speaking up for what you believe is wrong, but there's also aspect of you that believes in giving back. Tell me a little bit more.
Sure. It's always been part of growing up that we want to try to do things for people who may not have as much as us and try to give back. And the things in my lifetime which I've done, one is becoming a child advocate. So I had two cases where I was a child advocate for two young children. Maybe from not being a mother ever, being able to have some maternal instincts and be able to help and guide young people in their lives. That's been very rewarding. I'm still close to one of the young women. I started being her advocate when she was 12, and now she's in her 30s and still part of her life. She considers my husband and I to be kind of like her aunt and uncle. More recently, before I went back to work, I was baking and decorating cakes for an organization called Cake for Kids that helps to provide a special requested cake for a child who might be in an underprivileged or underserved situation where they might not have a celebration or a cake to celebrate their birthday. So that's been rewarding to be able to do that. Now that I'm working back full time, I have to put that on pause. But yes, I definitely believe that giving back is important.
And I love when you were telling me about the cake making. You said to me, I'm not creative. I don't sing. I don't dance, but I can decorate a cake. I want to push back lately in terms of not being creative. You mentioned this just a second ago. You found your own ways to contribute, your own ways to mother, because that maternal instinct is there for you. So you found your ways of how you do that. You've been married for many years and your husband is Jewish. You're navigating those traditions as well. It makes me come back to this aspect of harmony, how these things creep into how we show up and what we're able to do. What's informing you now? Like you did retire and then you came out of retirement.
Yeah, I was retired for 4 years, and I didn't think I would go back to work. Was enjoying being able to play poker, like, 3 times a week and, like I said, decorating cakes and just enjoying being retired. However, a VP of HR reached out to me to just do a project for a couple months. I said, "Okay, I can do that," because 'cause we'd had some, big bills. I thought, "That'll be good." 2 months went to 4 months, and then 4 months, they're basically like, "Oh, we really want you to come back to be a full-time HR business partner." I thought to myself, "I don't know," but besides the fact that the manager I was going to be reporting to, who I'd been working with, I respected her. We were very similar. We had very like approaches in how we did things, and so I knew that that was going to be a good connection. I looked at the healthcare situation because I was under covered California, aka affordable healthcare, and I was paying a huge amount of money per month just for sort of subpar medical. I started thinking, well, it would really be nice to be on a corporate medical plan again until I'm Medicare eligible, which is another, year and a half or so away. I decided that, this could be a good thing. That's why I decided to go back because, like a lot of people, where all of a sudden they're hit with these extreme amounts of premiums, and some people are having to say, okay, I'm not going to cover myself, which is not a good situation, obviously, but I could have still covered it myself. I just felt like it wasn't the responsible thing when this basically landed in my lap to have this opportunity to go back to work and have obviously good compensation and great medical benefits.
The decision you made coming out of retirement echoes many decisions that people are having to make in a healthcare landscape that has shifted significantly. I'm sure your experience resonates with a lot of people. As we wind down our conversation, I wanted to make sure to thank you. We have visited multiple areas in your life, and you have been generous in sharing. That is the thing about inherited and imposed scripts. It's not like the inherited scripts sit neatly here in this one aspect of life, and the imposed ones sit neatly over here in this aspect of life. And they're all mixed in, informing how we show up. To be able to sit down with you and tease out what those impacts are, how they have been operating, seeing how you're creating your own lane and responding to these different types of scripts. Certainly, leading with integrity being one of those ones that really do demonstrate where you hold the line and that self authorship. Reflecting on our conversation today, is there anything you would do differently?
But I guess if I look back over my lifetime and how inherited or imposed types of things that have come upon me, I would say that if I had 2020 vision from back when I was a young child, I would have taken more time to have fun and just not be so serious. I think that is one thing I would have changed. I don't really regret things that have happened because they're what happened and then you just incorporate those things. But I think that's one of the things I would say, especially in college. I was pre-med. I basically just studied every single day, every weekend. I didn't really do much of the usual college fun things, and I graduated in 4 years. I really did things very in an intense way. If I look back, I would have made the space to have more fun when I was younger and, maybe travel or do something. That would be one thing I maybe was too intense and too serious when I was younger. But that helps me inform now. When I'm working now, it's like, yeah, getting back into this high-tech schedule and expectations and demands, I'm really having to check myself and look in the mirror like, "Okay, Terry, you gotta balance this better. You can't let what's happened in the past happen again now." Making sure to focus on your health, your husband, your family still, and friends. One of my friends was like, "I don't really like you working because I don't get to see you very much." I just have to try to remember and balance all of that because it's definitely much more difficult being back full time at this age than it was in the past as far as the toll it takes on you.
We're coming back to that word balance, which I relate to this aspect of harmony. If there is a value that comes out of your culture that has woven itself throughout your life, you would pass on to the next generation, what would that value be?
The value would be family in one word, that you have to that's the most important thing, and that you have to, make sure that you do have that harmony and that you have to not take them for granted. Family is very aligned to the Japanese culture. I continue to try to put that at the forefront. Sometimes I think I have taken it for granted, and I just need to make sure to keep that at the forefront, that that's the most important thing.
All right. Well, thank you, Teri Schwimmer.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of Self-Centered Living. Come back next week as we continue exploring what shapes us and what wants to emerge. Our music is by Ketsu. Information on our participants can be found in the show notes. You can find me at selfcenteredliving.com. Take care until then.